Hi guys, and welcome back to Stir Crazy. My name's Jake, and I'm going to be taking you through how to make the cocktail that you've just got out of your Christmas cracker, the It's a Wonderful Life. So this cocktail is our rum old fashioned, or our Christmas twist on a rum old fashioned. So to make this drink, guys, obviously in your cracker you will have had your 2 little bottles that contain the liquid to make this drink. I'm going to be showing you how to make this drink if you don't have that liquid, so if you ever want to come back at another time and make this cocktail, I'll show you how you can make it. Additional things you're going to need, guys, so the glass you're going to be serving your drink in, you're going to need a whiskey tumbler, or what we like to call a old-fashioned glass, rocks glass, something like this. You're going to need some ice for stirring the drink down and serving the drink as well, and then a mixing glass to stir the drink down, as this is a stirred cocktail. And if you ever were going to come back and make this another time as well, just something to measure the liquids as well. So for this cocktail, guys, what we've done is we've riffed a classic old-fashioned. In terms of the origins of this cocktail, there aren't really any definitive facts. Its name sort of gives a hint that it is a very old cocktail. It's arguably the original cocktail. This was back before cocktails were called cocktails. And spirits weren't as well produced as they are now. They were a little bit harsher to drink, a little bit rougher around the edges. So people would add ingredients to them to make them a bit more palatable and easier to consume. So things like the old fashioned were born. They would do this by adding water to bring the percentage down, bring the strength down. And they would add things like bitters and sugar to them. And this was a classic format. So they took a spirit, they added some bitters in the form of, well, botanical bitters that were existing at the time. They were used medicinally at the time, but then they started to be used in cocktails, or what would eventually be known as cocktails. And then sugar as well. As we all know, adding a little bit of sugar to something usually helps it, makes it a little bit easier to consume, especially if you're dealing with something like the spirits they would have been consuming at the time, which would have been quite difficult to drink. So the original one was a whiskey old-fashioned. It would have probably used bourbon, as the drink originates in America sort of around the 1800s, which was known as the sort of the golden era of cocktail making. This is when a lot of the classic cocktails were created that were riffed and twisted on, and it leaves us with a lot of the standards that we use today. The old-fashioned being one of those main formats, you know, that sort of served in a whiskey glass, spirit, sugar, bitters. That format has been replicated hundreds of times, and is probably one of the more common cocktails consumed in bars today. What we've done for this one, guys, is we've taken that sort of format, that spirit, sugars, bitter and water, and we've just created some little riffs on that to make it a little bit more Christmassy friendly, as it is the time of year. So rather than using bourbon, we wanted to go for rum. It works just as well in an old-fashioned, especially an aged rum, which is what we're using. It still gives you that lovely strength and that sort of cask finish that you're looking for. But sometimes it can just give us slightly more spicier notes, and depending on where the rum's made from, a lot of the characteristics of that. So we're using Bacardi Quattro, which is a 4-year-old rum from Puerto Rico. They basically take a white rum and they age it in ex-bourbon barrels. So you're still going to get that sort of charred caramelization that you get from bourbon, but we're going to be using rum instead, so you get some of those more sugarcane, grassier notes in there as well. And what we've done with this one, guys, is we've infused it with roasted chestnuts. Obviously, Christmas, chestnuts, that time of year, so we wanted to get all of those sort of lovely roasted aromas that you get when you ever walk past someone roasting chestnuts on the street. So essentially what we've done, if you ever wanted to make this yourself, we just had a bottle of aged rum. You can use Bacardi if you want to, obviously any other aged rum you want to use at your own prerogative. And then we've just taken about 250 grams of fresh chestnuts, put them in the oven. We've scored them first with an X on the top of the chestnut, put them in the oven, roasted them from around 10 minutes at about 200 degrees, until the shells start to crack. Then we've taken them out the oven, peeled off the outer shell, sat them in the rum for 24 hours, and then just strained it off. And it's as simple as that. And then you have your own chestnut rum that you can use for even an old-fashioned or any other cocktails that you want to experiment, or even go as far as trying it with other spirits as well. This would work brilliantly in a whiskey. It would also work amazingly in something like cognac. You sort of, you know, it's your own imagination that is the limitation with that one. So yeah, so we've got a chestnut infused rum. For the sweetener, rather than going for the traditional old-fashioned, used a sugar cube. A lot of people still use sugar cubes when they're making their old fashions, but they can be a little bit tedious, as you've got to, wait quite a while for that sugar to dissolve into the drink if you want those sort of sweet notes. And sometimes I know people can get a little bit impatient and they're left with a under-sweetened drink, which is still a little bit too boozy and not as fun to consume. So what we've opted for is we've opted for a pine smoked honey syrup. Pine, Christmas tree, just sort of hitting those, not necessarily generic, but those sort of common flavors that you might find around Christmas. The smell of a Christmas tree is something that every one of us will be quite familiar with when making drinks around Christmas. So when we call this a honey syrup, essentially honey is a bit too thick in the form that you get it in. So most people will dilute this down with water before we use it. Just makes it a little bit easier to use. And also honey is going to be a lot sweeter than normal sugar, and that helps bring that flavor more in line, so you're not over sweetening your drink, as that's quite a common thing. You can go too far in one direction and be left with essentially like a glass of sugar. Rather than like using actual pine needles, which can be quite difficult to get their hands on, we've opted to lengthen our honey syrup. Rather than just using water, we've used a Lapsang Souchong tea, which is actually a smoked pine tea. So that's how we're going to get those lovely sort of smoky aromas into the cocktail that we want, and lengthen our honey syrup down, making it a lot easier to use. Finally, in the form of our bitters, the traditional old-fashioned would have used something like Angostura, which has loads and loads and loads of botanicals in it. Bitters are always described as like a bartender's salt and pepper. They're our seasoning. They're things that we add to cocktails to bind flavors together, as well as enhance some of the flavors within the drink. For this one, what we've opted for is some chocolate bitters from the Fee Brothers. These are going to give a really rich, dark cacao note to the cocktail. As well as that's going to help bring all those other flavors together. If you think about chocolate, when you've got things like chestnuts, that roasted aroma, that works really well with cacao, and the sort of honey and smoke. All of those flavors are going to be brought together by the bitters. It's going to help bind everything together and enhance everything. For the water, it's as simple as we're just going to be using some ice. Even got a proper fire going, so you're going to hear some pops and crackles in the background. Some ice, just some ice you're going to need, guys, as we're going to stir the drink down. This is going to help dilute the cocktail and make it easier to consume, as we're working with some high proof ABVs here, and you don't want the drink to be too strong, otherwise you're going to get more of an ethanol hit before any of the other lovely aromas come through. So getting that cocktail to perfect dilution is always key. So yeah, that's it, guys. We've got chestnut infused rum, a smoked honey syrup, some chocolate bitters, and some ice. That's all you're going to need to make this drink, guys, but yours is nice and simple. You're just going to have 2 little bottles in your cracker that when you popped it open. One will have your smoked honey syrup in it, the other will have your rum and bitters in it. All you guys will need is your glass and something to stir the drink down in. I've got a mixing glass here. This is sort of the bartender's best friend when coming to things like stirred drinks. We love a mixing vessel, as they're great for stirring cocktails down. They're nice big volume as well, so we can stir a few drinks at once when we're working in our bars. For you guys, if you don't have a mixing glass at home, nice and simple. If you've got a cocktail shaker, just take the large tin element of that shaker. That's great for stirring drinks down in, as well as the tin's got a great thermal conductivity rate on it as well, so it's great for keeping the drink nice and cold. Otherwise, just grab yourself a standard classic pint glass or any tall vessel that you can get the liquid in, as well as some ice, and you can get a spoon around. Opt for something with a smooth inside, nothing rigid. It is easier to stir and get the ice moving, as we want to get this drink diluted. So let's make the drink. If you are coming back and making this at another time and you've had a go at making these ingredients and you've got them ready, what we're going to be doing, guys, is we're going to be adding in 60 ml of our chestnut infused rum into our mixing glass, and 2 dashes of our chocolate bitters. If you are making this drink from the cracker, guys, that is what you will find in bottle number 1. So just add that one straight in. You'll know which one's the right bottle, as one will have quite a lot of liquid in it and one will have not so much liquid in it. So that's everything that's going to be in the first bottle, is just our rum and the chocolate bitters. And then in our next bottle, we have got our smoked honey syrup. And I'm just going to be adding in 10 ml of that, as it is, still going to have quite a bit of sweetness to it, and we don't want to over sweeten our drink and lose some of the subtlety flavors that we're looking for. And that's what you're going to find in your second bottle, is just that smoked honey syrup. Nice and simple, guys. And that's everything that we need in our mixing glass. Now all that's left to do is ice up our vessels, give it a stir, and then strain it off. For my glass, guys, I'm going to be serving it over a nice big block of ice, as I like to make these at home. If you ever want to know how to make these, head to our Facebook page and look at some of our previous masterclasses on Stir Crazy. And we did one on Mezcal, the Mexican spirit, and I taught you how to make these lovely big blocks of ice as well, if you ever wanted to pop and learn how to make these yourself. Otherwise, grab some cubed ice and just give it a nice big, basically fill it all the way up, guys. You don't want to leave, you want to make sure there's as much ice in there as possible. More ice the better, as it's going to keep the drink colder. Especially for me right now, as I'm sat next to a roaring fire, so I want to make sure that my cocktail is kept nice and cold. And the more ice, it's just going to keep the drink colder and stop it getting too diluted as we're mixing it down, and you don't want the drink to go too far in the other way and become watery in the glass. Otherwise, let's add some ice into our mixing glass. Some lovely cracked ice here that I'm using. And then we're just going to give it a stir down. If you haven't got a bar spoon, just anything long that can get into your mixing glass, just so you can give it a nice stir down. And for this, guys, the best way to tell when your cocktail is done, it's just going to be taste. Like when you're cooking, you want to taste as you go. When you get it so that burn is just about disappearing and it's not too harsh on the tongue and the throat anymore, that's the perfect point. You don't want to go too far in the mixing glass because it is going to continue to dilute slowly in your glass, so you don't want to go too far here, otherwise it's quite subtle that how far it can before it goes into over dilution. So just give this a nice stir down. If you're using a tin to stir down, you'll get a nice visualization when it's nice and cold, as the outside of the tin will get nice and frosted, and it will be cold to the touch, as my mixing glass is now. So yeah, just when you think it might be done, give it a little taste. Yep, and that's ready to go. Then you just need something to hold back the ice. And I'm going to strain this into our mixing glass. Sorry, into our rocks glass. And then for our garnish, guys, you'll have a lovely little candy stick in the glass that you can just hook on the side there like that. And that is how we make our Christmas cocktail, the It's a Wonderful Life. I'm just going to give this a little taste now. Yeah, I'm a sucker for an old fashioned. I will always opt for an old fashioned. They're my favourite styles of drink. I've always been a big, big fan of them. And I love this one. It's a Wonderful Life, based off of the movie. I'm not actually that big fan of a movie, and I probably need quite a few of these to get through it, as it's not my style of movie. But for this drink, guys, it is perfect for that sort of point in the evening when you've ate far too much food, you're full, you're sat in front of a fire, you're chilling out, you're watching rubbish movies, maybe the kids are running around screaming, playing with their presents. This is exactly what you're gonna need. It's got all those lovely, rich caramel notes from the rum and the honey, and it's got all these deep, rich cacao notes from the bitters. It's just all works together brilliantly, and you get that lovely smoke and roasted aromas from the chestnuts and the Lapsang Souchong tea. So yeah, that is how you make your cracker drink, guys, the It's a Wonderful Life. Cheers and Merry Christmas.